On this edition of Independent Sources, Ending Secure Communities, a major victory for immigration advocates who've been fighting the much maligned program.
Unfortunately, we can't say that ICE is totally out of New York City. We've seen they kind of go to different maneuvers basically once we stop one thing.
And needle work, using a controversial technique to fight drug abuse and HIV/AIDS in the South Bronx.
Where would we be at without a syringe exchange program in the communities that they're located in? We would have probably 90% HIV seroprevalence in this community.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre. New York City has joined a growing list of cities and states around the country that are bowing out of the controversial Secure Communities program. The City Council recently voted 41-6 to end cooperation with the federal government when it asked for an immigrant detainer. The program started in 2008 and made it possible for local law enforcement to check the immigration status of anyone they detain against the FBI's database. President Obama touted secure communities as a means of rooting out high-level criminals, but experts have found that the program has not lowered the country's crime rate. In fact, immigration advocates argue that secure communities may actually be making communities less so, because it's contributed to a growing distrust between immigrants and local law enforcement. So, will that change with this recent victory? I sat down with Alisa Well of the Immigrant Defense Project to get answers to that and other questions. Why did the City Council decide to end its relationship with ICE?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. We've actually been part of a coalition called the ICE Out of Rikers Coalition that's been working for the past 5 years to try to end collaboration between the city and ICE. We believe that the mass detention and deportation system that ICE currently runs is not only in violation of human rights and civil liberties, but also a waste of resources. And so we've been trying to convince the city for years that we need to protect our New York residents and not funnel them into this unjust system and use a bunch of resources in the meantime. So I think the key reason that they really revisited the law this time around was because there's been a wave of litigation across the country saying that it's unconstitutional what ICE is doing, asking local police or jail facilities to basically arrest an immigrant without any warrant based on probable cause.
Some people will argue that, hey, immigrants, some of them do commit crime, and to the extent that they should be deported, they should. What do you say to that?
I say that everyone at least deserves a fair day in court. Right now, our immigration laws are so harsh that people can be deported for a wide range of offenses, including both longtime lawful permanent residents or green card holders and folks that are undocumented or, asylum seekers. And so things that, I can do as a U.S. citizen and, pay my dues or pay a fine or whatever can lead someone into this really unjust system where they can be detained sometimes for years, sometimes never be able to present any of the equities of their case before a judge.
What was happening in 2008 that the federal government wanted to really target immigrants?
So, basically it's kind of over the years, there's been a real upward tick in the focus on trying to deport immigrants. So, if you go back more than 15 years ago, we were deporting sometimes just a couple thousand people a year, and right now we're deporting 400,000 people a year.
400,000.
Yeah, it's a really insane number, and I think sometimes we get so used to living in this era of mass deportation, but it hasn't always been that way, and we've actually deported more people in the last 15 years than the last 150 years of our history. So it's this kind of massive scale, and I think it's a combination of these really harsh laws that were passed that ended up.
But why? 2008 was not too long ago. What was going on that merited this policy?
Well, September 11th, so going back a little further, September 11th really created the Department of Homeland Security, and so tons of resources started going into DHS in the name of tourism. And what we saw was a lot of that got funneled into these deportation systems instead. And so then we saw things like special registration where people were kind of lined up to face deportation. And, I think once that infrastructure exists, coupled with, some politicians that really don't want to see our country, thriving immigrant communities stay in the U.S.
Was there any merit to it? I mean, sometimes, some policies started out with a good idea and it just went amok. Was there any good behind this policy?
I think Secure Communities was trying to build off of this collaboration between jails and prisons and immigration. And so Secure Communities was basically like the high-tech version of that. So that it said basically whenever you get your fingerprints taken, if you're arrested or you're stopped by the police, that will go to immigration. So, I think there's some that may argue, oh, this is efficiency, but I think people didn't really expect what would happen to happen, that, hundreds of thousands of people would be thrown into this mass detention and deportation.
And let's be clear, this is this rule applies only to New York. Other municipalities, other cities are still collaborating with the feds, right?
So New York's really taken a leadership role starting 5 years ago, and then we revisited this legislation. This is the third time. So each time we've gotten stronger and better. And we actually led the kind of charge that then cities across the country started pushing back. So now over 250 municipalities have passed similar policies or legislation protecting their residents, but it's not nationwide, that's right.
From what I understand, Secure Communities was supposed to lower the crime rate in this country, but according to some experts, it has had the opposite effect. Why is that?
I mean, well, to start with, I don't know that that's what Secure Communities, that's what they said it would do. Who knows? I think the goal was to try to deport as many people as possible. But, there have been recent studies that have come out that showed that there's actually no correlation between Secure Communities and lowering crime. And if anything, what we've seen and what some of the research shows is that people are really afraid to contact the local police, to bear witness in cases, because they see that someone gets arrested or someone talks to the police and they might end up in a detention deportation system. So that's why I think it's really important that we have a bright line rule that we will not cooperate as a city with ICE, and then people can feel comfortable, reaching out to local law enforcement when they need to.
How would sending someone's fingerprints to the FBI affect his or her immigration status?
So we're still sending the fingerprints, unfortunately. So there was actually a campaign that the Immigrant Defense Project, where I work, was involved in to try to get our state to pull out and say that we don't want to send our fingerprints to immigration. And we actually won that fight, and the governor pulled us out. And then immigration came back and said, never mind, we don't need your permission, because when someone sends their fingerprints, it goes to the FBI, and then the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security can share what they want. So those fingerprints are still going there. So the important thing that's being changed is that what happens after those fingerprints are sent. Right now, what happens is ICE sends what's called a detainer, which is a request that the jail hold the person, for up to 2 days for them to pick up the person. And what that actually results in many times is people being held at Rikers for months or even years while they fight their case because they can't pay bail, they can't access any programs. So now the jail will no longer hold that person based on that detainer, which was, many courts have found is just unconstitutional. The detainer is not even based on any evidence. It's just ICE kind of checking off a box.
Do you have any evidence that Rikers is or any other local law enforcement cooperating with the feds despite this rule?
Well, so it actually hasn't gone into effect yet. The mayor's set to sign it next week, and then it'll go into effect 30 days from then. But right now, we see that the Department of Correction is following the last law, which was a little bit more narrow.
Which was? Can you tell us what?
So that law basically said that they wouldn't hand over certain categories of people. And it was basically people who had either almost no prior convictions, and only a pending misdemeanor. So it wasn't based on the same judicial warrant thing. So within that, I think for the most part, Rikers has been doing a good job of abiding by that. NYPD, has been a little bit harder to monitor. And probation actually just recently told us that they're going to change their policy. We had met with them, and they told us they were handing over about 200 people in the past 2 years, and they're now going to pass some similar policy in line with the current legislation.
So where do we go from now?
Well, so this is a huge victory and a huge step, and I think Melissa Markham-Viverito, the speaker, and Mayor de Blasio deserve a ton of credit. But one issue is this information sharing is still happening, especially the NYPD can still share information with ICE, and they're still getting people's fingerprints. So we're worried that We've already seen an uptick in home arrests, home raids. So we're worried that that's going to happen more and more. We've seen people getting arrested in courthouses. So unfortunately, we can't say that like ICE is totally out of New York City. We've seen they kind of go to different maneuvers basically once we stop one thing. And so I think we need to try to defund the deportation machine. Billions of dollars that could be going to really creating healthy,
better schools. There's
so many things we could use this money for that would really create safer, healthier communities.
Well, Alisa Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Still to come on the show, a new graphic novel that's helping immigrants fight fraud. Before that, Crystal Lowe has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Higher rents and fewer job opportunities are causing more Senegalese immigrants to leave the area known as Little Senegal. The neighborhood is located along West 116th Street in Harlem. The exodus of immigrants has already led to 5 restaurants being closed this year. Some Senegalese have even returned home because they speak little English and often struggle to find jobs outside of the French and Arabic-speaking Little Senegal. The Senegalese Association estimates that 20 to 30% of New York State's 16,000 Senegalese immigrants have left the area as a result of gentrification. The Uptowner interviewed Ka So, an office manager at the Senegalese Association, who says that before gentrification set in 7 to 10 years ago, about 80% of Senegalese immigrants living in New York State lived in Little Senegal. That's down to about 50% today. The Riverdale Press reports that Kingsbridge resident Amanda Matos is one of 5 young people to receive a $25,000 award from Peace First. Peace First is a national nonprofit that promotes youth leaders and peace activists. Matos' award will go towards the Womanhood Project, an organization she launched to encourage social and political activism in high school girls in the Bronx. She, along with other Columbia and Barnard students, work as mentors and hold workshops for 11th grade girls who attend the International Charter High School in the Bronx. Matos hopes that her program will provide an outlet for children of color, particularly girls, to explore racism, sexism, and self-love. The Manhattan Times profiles the West Harlem Community Healthy Food Hub. The hub is a pantry that provides food to low-income residents. It also operates on a client choice method that is very different from typical food pantries. It allows visitors to select their own food items and encourages them to focus on healthy food options. The community-based development corporation, West Harlem Group Assistance, runs the program. Deborah Pollock, the director of social services at WHGA, says she hopes that giving people the choice to select their own food will take some stigma away from using the food pantry. The pantry also offers cooking demonstrations and nutritional education classes. Keep Rising to the Top is a dance company founded to help at-risk youth overcome challenges through dance. The company's founder, Violeta Galagarza, will celebrate 25 years of empowering over 5,000 students this November at El Museo del Barrio. She was once awarded a scholarship to learn dance at the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater, but her aspirations were cut short when she became a teen mom and couldn't fully pursue the opportunity. Galagarza used that experience and turned it into a positive. She started helping at-risk youth with problems ranging from self-esteem issues to suicide and AIDS. She encourages her students to follow their professional dreams and stresses that her primary focus is to inspire, uplift, and push individuals to be free through dance. And finally, in other news, Mott Hall Bridges Academy, a small middle school located in the heart of Brownsville, Brooklyn, will host their first annual fall market harvest on Saturday, November 15th from 11 to 6 p.m. The school opened its doors 4 years ago under the leadership of Nadia Lopez. The school started with just 45 sixth graders and has now expanded to nearly 200 students from grades 6 to 8. The school is now using the market as an opportunity to promote local businesses and encourage and strengthen student, parent, and community relations. The market will feature urban gear, collectibles, and a tightly curated selection of jewelry and crafts by local artisans and designers. Those are just a few headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Independent Sources will be back right after this.
Thanks for staying tuned. Employment agency fraud is big business in Queens, from where nearly a third of the city's complaints emanate. These agencies often target low-wage workers and immigrants who are desperate. They promise good-paying jobs for an upfront fee, but deliver below minimum wage work, and in some cases, references to places that are not even hiring. The group, New Immigrant Community Empowerment, is doing its part to address this problem with the publication of a graphic novel called Ana Busca Trabajo, or Anna Looks for Work. I spoke to Jessica Garcia, the Director of Programs and Organizing at NICE, about why they chose to use a comic book to tackle this issue. Jessica, there are a lot of ways to combat fraud. Why did you guys decided on this novel idea to do that?
For a couple of reasons. This issue in particular is an issue that affects our membership a lot. They use employment agencies to find work very often, and in their experience, they were finding that they were paying for a service and then the service was never delivered. And when they went to get a refund, the agencies refused it. We chose a graphic novel because we also find that among new immigrants, having a piece of literature that's heavy text that just gives a lot of facts is not always the most accessible form of communication. And our members really wanted it to be very accessible and engaging. And so they decided that a graphic novel would be the ideal way of communicating the main key ways of avoiding fraud.
How widespread is employment fraud in the immigrant community?
We believe it's very widespread. It's hard to tell by the numbers. DCA has reported that they get around...
That's the Department of Consumer Affairs?
Yes, the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs has reported that they get around 160 to 200 complaints a year. And that's data as of 2012. We're waiting to hear more recent data. But we also believe, even just anecdotally, that a lot of immigrants are not reporting fraud, both for fear of retaliation as well as fear of being exposed as
also shame as well, right?
There is a lot of shame, you're right. This is a lot of money that they're losing, and it's often their own countrymen who are taking advantage of them. And so the idea of paying $150 to $120, or the other way around, for a service and then not getting it is yeah, there's a lot of shame.
Are these legitimate employment agency, or are these the multi-services that populate various immigrant communities?
It's a little bit of both. There are around 300 agencies that are licensed by the Department of Consumer Affairs. Not all of these commit fraud, but some of them do. And then we also know that there are quite a lot of unlicensed agencies who do operate under the guise of other businesses, who maybe rent a desk behind a laundromat or behind a tattoo parlor, or maybe share with a multi-service agency. And really, they're not authorized to do this work, but they do so anyway.
You know, give us Anna's story. You have Ana Busca Trabajo. Anna is looking for work. Give us a sense of the fraud, how it actually works.
Yeah, that was very important to our members to describe what fraud looks like, because often members don't know, community members don't know. So in Anna's experience, she goes to an employment agency where she pays $120 and they guarantee her work. They say that English isn't a problem, that status isn't a problem, and when they end up doing is they send her to false placements. So in one instance, she goes to a place that doesn't actually exist. It's the address is there, but it's not the business that she was told it was going to be. In another instance, they're just not hiring. Maybe they were hiring a few months ago, but they're not hiring. And when she goes back to the agency, they tell her it's all her fault, that she refused to take the jobs that they sent her to, and they can't give her a refund. And in fact, they're going to report her to police if she keeps bothering them. In the second instance, she has two employment agency experiences, and this is also really common. With the second employment agency, they find her a job, but the job is exploitative. So it's excessive hours, no overtime, and the job tasks themselves are beyond the job description that was given to her when she first applied for the work. And for that, it's really more labor abuse, but we find that they go together oftentimes when it comes to
What kind of jobs
workers.
are we talking about?
We are talking about jobs that low-wage workers tend to have. The law describes them as unskilled manual workers. So it's workers who find work in factories, in restaurants, as domestic workers, in retail oftentimes, sometimes some types of construction work that's low skilled. And unfortunately, currently the law allows for low wage workers to be charged a fee before they get placed. And oftentimes this is all a cash industry. So employment agencies take advantage of that.
And when we look at this, what kind of impact is this campaign having? Do you see abuse on a decline, or up or down, or the same?
We haven't been able to document a decline in abuse, but we have been working with the Department of Consumer Affairs, with the Attorney General's office, to make sure that they are hearing about complaints so they can go after the bad actors. And so we are seeing a slight increase in complaints. And we hope that with this novela, more people will find themselves empowered and knowledgeable about what to do. And they'll start filing those complaints so that we, DCA can work together with us to make sure that they're adhering to the laws.
I'm interested. What kind of consequences do they face, these unscrupulous agents? And have the officials actually tried any of them?
Right now, the consequences are what we believe are small. The penalties for violations are $100 per violation, which they can make up easily with just one person. Yeah. And so the violations, in terms of cost, are very small. For unlicensed agencies, DCA can padlock the offices so that they can't open up, but that's not very often used. In fact, I don't think it's been used in recent years. And so really what DCA tries to do is bring them up to compliance. This summer, the Attorney General filed a claim against 5 agencies, and they ended up settling out of court, which was, we were very grateful for them for doing that. They basically made them pay a fine of up to $20,000.
$20,000?
$20,000.
Okay.
And that was for making false promises, not issuing refunds, and also for discriminating in their practices. So, the enforcement needs some work. We feel that even though the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Attorney General's office are willing to go after these agencies, at the end of the day, what we're dealing with is a systemic issue. The laws are really structured in a way that allows agencies to take advantage of workers, and so we'd like to see stronger laws to protect workers.
What do you mean by stronger laws? What exactly are you looking for them to tighten up on?
The current law, so employment agencies are governed by the state's general business law, and the current law allows agencies to charge before placement to only Class A and A1 workers, what they define as these unskilled workers. Mm-hmm. And so every other type of worker, when they use an employment agency, they pay after they get placed. Whether it's 10% or 15%, once you have your job, you pay the agency. With low-wage workers, they are allowed to be charged before they get placed, and it's supposed to be a deposit towards the larger payment, but oftentimes that's the only fee that's collected because there really is no genuine attempt to place.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Jessica Garcia, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A copy of the graphic novel is available on the NICE website, nynice.org. When we come back, a controversial technique that's getting results in the South Bronx. Finally from us, Boom Health is a syringe exchange program that's had tremendous success in fighting the AIDS/HIV epidemic in the South Bronx. Judith Escalona tells us more about the program and why this technique is still cast in a bad light, even with all the good it's done.
Boom Health, formerly known as Citywide Harm Reduction, has been serving the South Bronx community since the 1990s. It was one of New York City's first syringe exchange programs. Boom Health offers free and sterile syringes to intravenous drug users as a way of stopping the spread of AIDS and other infectious diseases. Ed Manchester, director of Boom Health's Harm Reduction Center, has been with the organization from the beginning. Back then, the predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood was nearly overrun by AIDS and hepatitis.
Along with our sister programs, we are proud to say that from 54% in 1995 to 2013, there is about a 3.2% HIV seroprevalence in New York.
While statistics show that syringe exchange programs are the most effective ways of combating the spread of AIDS and hepatitis C, they are not without controversy.
Most folks do not want addicts in their backyard. The fact is, in some people's backyards, that's all there may be.
Though both the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control endorse syringe exchange programs, there are those who oppose them. Detractors argue that syringe exchange programs promote drug use and help support the black market in drugs within the communities they are located. For Manchester, it's a matter of helping individuals to gradually end their drug addiction by tending to their needs, first and foremost, not harming themselves or those around them.
Where would we be at without a syringe exchange program in the communities that they're located in? We would have probably 90% HIV seroprevalence in this community. There would be crime all over the place. There would be public nuisance. There would be public displays of injecting drug users.
Boom Health was born in 2013 from the merging of citywide harm reduction and Bronx AIDS services. The two complementary programs combined into a groundbreaking service model that involves a more holistic approach to ending drug addiction and fostering wellness in the community.
No, we're more than just a syringe exchange program. We have other services that we offer here. We're the only harm reduction center, I believe, within the United States that actually has a recovery program in it.
That recovery program involves peer-to-peer counseling and support. Carmen England is a community outreach worker and a former addict.
I got involved in a lot of the trainings that we're doing, and the trainings were about HIV, harm reduction, because everybody's going to use. So harm reduction teaches you if you're going to use, do it the right way. If you're an injection drug user, use syringes. If you're involved in sex, protect yourself, use condoms.
Free condoms, free harm reduction supplies.
People usually learn about Boom Health by word of mouth from friends or others in their circle. Sarah Billett, originally from Staten Island, recently joined Boom Health.
I was hanging out with some people, and they said, look, I'm on my way to Boom. Why don't you come and try it out? They offer so many services. So I did, and through then, I've recommended the girl who is actually coming in to do an interview, I recommended her to come in, and a lot of people. I just feel they're really out to help you, whether you're an addict, domestic violence, whether you're clean or you're still struggling with addiction. They don't turn anybody away. They're out to help everybody.
Everybody means everybody. Ramon Collazo is in the recovery program. He arrived in New York from Puerto Rico and found himself in the streets, addicted and homeless. Today, he conducts outreach.
Cuando tú cambias de un país, de Puerto Rico, venir para acá, que no tienes a nadie, que no eso, es muy diferente la vida, te cambia por completo, porque entonces ya no tengo un sitio donde dormir, que era en casa de mi mamá, ya tengo que dormir o en el tren, o en la calle, o en un hospital, ¿me entiendes? O en el shelter, ¿sabes? Que se me hizo un poquito duro. Ya yo creo que esa experiencia que yo pasé de tener una familia a no tener a nadie, eso es lo que me ha ayudado y me ha dado fuerza para seguir hasta donde yo estoy.
Boom Health now delivers a full range of prevention, health, and social services to over 8,000 from the hardest-to-reach communities in the Bronx. Among the expanding roster of programs, a new wellness center currently under construction is slated to open in 2015. That green building will house a cafe and the first LGBTQ and youth drop-in center in the Bronx.
There are a lot of reasons why people become addicted. In the end, we're all human beings, and that's what matters most, is that we serve people from our heart, and our members certainly can see that.
Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.